Greetings and welcome to the Now Mic'd Up Trinity Radio program. I am Braxton Hunter, and along with me today to my right is
Jonathan Pritchett.
And we are here to expose Dr. Jonathan Pritchett. You know, the Capturing Christianities thing has always been exposing you to the intellectual side of Christianity. We're going to expose the intellectual side of Christianity embodied in Dr. Jonathan Pritchett to someone else, hopefully, but certainly with respect to some TikTokers. Dr. Pritchett has not gotten involved in the world of TikTokery, have you?
No.
Does your wife watch TikTok?
No.
Do you watch TikTok ever? Just watch it?
No.
Do you ever do reels? Shorts?
Like those things on Facebook?
The TikTok thing on every other platform.
Once again, yes, if some fitness influencer or homesteader. No, if it's any of this stuff. Christian or atheist.
Well, all right then. So let's go ahead and New Testament theologist says, don't let Prime expose himself. I appreciate the geometric animal shirt. Yes, that is from a little known YouTuber. Let's try to help him out. He's called What Do You Meme? John McCrae, good friend of the channel.
Need to get him a couple more subs, right? He's really
so anyway, yeah, he'll get there one day. I mean, you know, you gotta help out people that have trouble. And one of his problems is he's never really been that cool. People that aren't cool have trouble making it.
Exactly.
Right? And What Do You Meme's just not that cool, is he?
Yeah.
Of course he is. He's like the coolest guy I know.
Right.
Anyway, all right. So let's jump into this. Pritchett, would you like to see some TikToks? Now remember that we're going to. Good. That's how we want it. And we're going to take Q&A and comments and all that. Yes, it's earlier in the day for those of you that are here at 1 o'clock and you're like, wait, what the heck?
Hey, we're getting the West Coast, so you get to start your morning off right.
Yeah.
And I get the rest of my day to not have to think about this.
You know, I felt bad about this. More people will probably see this than saw my other posts. So New Testament theologist would also like to get to 1,000. We mobilized our audience to get One Life over 1,000 yesterday. Thank you all for that. Thank you so much on behalf of One Life Church. New Testament theologist Nick Quint, incredible guy with an incredible degree from Fuller, I think. And
well, I mean, it's not Trinity, but you know.
Well, I just said it was an incredible degree, and he's one of the
sharpest
biblical minds you're going to encounter. And he's only got 17. He's only 17 away from 1,000. Could we get
him to 1,000 before the end of the show?
Could we get in there by the end of the show? We probably could. We'll have more than 17 in here. So, all right, let's get to it. Because yes, you're right, Rich O'Cat. Pritchett is looking forward to this. So let's jump in now. I wanted to curate these. Only one of these have I already responded to, but I wanted to curate these to be ones that I thought that Jonathan Pritchett would particularly appreciate. So there's, as you saw from the thumbnail, we're going to look at, if you don't know, Abraham Piper, I guess. That's John Piper's kid. And he's no longer a Christian. Is that right? I mean, maybe he is now. I don't think so. I think he's known for having TikTok stuff. All right, so we're going to do that, but then we're also going to take a look at some people that are concerned with masculinity. That's something that is certainly a hot button issue in our culture, anything to do with masculinity. Thank you, the very masculine Jim Amberg, for that $20 super chat. He says, guys, pick a time. You're killing my very masculine workout schedule.
If you would, thank you for the super chat, but if you would just become, a theology geek fitness person like myself, you could do this show while you work out, and you don't even have to go to the gym at all. I don't work out at a gym. Haven't been at a gym since March of 2020, and all I've done is make gains. So
for those of you that don't know Jonathan Pritchett, now you understand why he's perfect for this task today after hearing these kind of grumpy comments. Yeah. So let's just jump into it. This is a very masculine-centered one.
I think I figured out why women are dating outside the church these days, and it's pretty simple. Because church...
Hey there, bud. Terrible video. I just want to get that right out of the way. Right off the hop here. You imply in your video that the reason that women no longer want to date men in the church is that because men in the church are no longer masculine enough. And the reason they're no longer masculine, according to your video, is that they don't go to the gym or something, right? I just want to offer a counterpoint to your wrong answer. Maybe it's because the church is the primary institution responsible for the narrative that women are second-class citizens and that their God-given role in life is to become wives and serve their husbands. I mean, it's that or your thing. For sure, one of those two.
Dr. Pritchett.
Yeah, I mean, he said terrible video and followed up with a terrible video. But to be honest with you, I mean, that's, TikTok, right? It's just one terrible video after another. But I have to say, I actually don't think it's either his thing or the other guy's thing. I think it's a both and, okay? As someone who is into physical fitness and an egalitarian, I can agree with both of those things. There are a lot of flabby, weak men in the church. And, of course, as a complementarian, background, I've seen and witnessed that a lot of women are turned off by this notion, this caricature of complementarianism that it is, just get married and be submissive to your husband. But it never actually works out that way in reality because, again, coming from that background, the biggest simps I've ever met are these Southern Baptist complementarian types, and they simp harder than male feminists trying to get dates from these frumpy leftist chicks. But to the credit to the Southern Baptist complementarians, they actually do get women, and more attractive ones. According to science, conservative women are more attractive than liberal women. But be that as it may, I do agree with both of these. But, still, Southern Baptist complementarians, I don't agree with their theology, but they get bossed around by their wives all the time. So go figure.
Yeah. Do you agree with this, Pritchett? Go to the gym, read Keener.
Yeah, you can actually get an app.
Well, you don't have to do it at the same time. These are just two things you should do.
They are, but there are things that you can do at the same time if you use the voiceover feature on your phone to read the ebook to you of Craig Keener while you do exercises. So, but in Ephesians chapter 5, where it talks about wives, the whole thing is headed off by submit yourselves to one another, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're a complementarian or an egalitarian, if you're a Christian man, you should be serving your wife just as much as she serves you.
And you're called to love her.
Right. And you're called to be a father to children just as wives should be mothers to children. That's actually a good thing. That's not a bad thing.
Right. So there's something to say here. Look at this. First TikTok out of the chute. Jonathan's not being a complete grumpy curmudgeon about this. He's saying, some Christians have been dirtbags to women.
No, I didn't say that.
Some Christians haven't been dirtbags to
women?
women?
Yeah, some Christians have. But
can you get it straight,
my point is, for all the bluster that they present this idea, there are certain churches that have presented this idea of complementarianism that is a caricature to where you would think that the women's only purpose in life is to be a wife and a mother to children. But that is their highest purpose, in my opinion. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Even as an egalitarian, what is greater than bringing new life into the world and raising it up? Husbands and wives together should stay together and do that whole thing. That's a good thing. But that's not the only thing that even complementarians do. But like I said, I have seen so many complementarian windbag Southern Baptists get bossed around by their wives. It's just all bluster, in my opinion, because, like I said, they're the biggest simps there are that I've ever
Define
met.
Bluster.
This just
showy
about their, the male patriarchy
blather?
versus it's just they're overstating their case.
Well, we actually
and then they ask their wives for permission to do anything.
So Jim Amberg, that's like because you're an egalitarian, but your wife is a complementarian.
Yes,
and
she
so
is.
I've said you should be a good egalitarian and do what your wife says and be a complementarian. So anyway, Jim Amberg says, "What's a good resource for studying Psalms?" Real quick, and then we'll move on.
What is a good resource for studying Psalms?
Mm-hmm. I actually have a pocket Psalms with the introduction written by Saint Bono, but aside from that,
from Saint Bono,
for us, if you're a Christian, you're a saint, right?
I don't know. I don't know of any resources off the top of my head.
Well, I do. The Old Testament, one thing that it isn't
the Old Testament background Bible commentary is always helpful.
Yeah, well, that's a good resource.
But I have not read a whole lot of commentaries on the Psalms. But one I know that you should avoid is the Holman Christian Standard commentary on the Psalms written by Steve Lawson. It's just awful. But I have not waded into a whole lot of good commentaries on
Typical
the Psalms.
Pritchett. Knows what he's against, doesn't know what he's for.
That's right.
Here's a woman reacting to this question. To be honest, actually, even finding young men, let alone any worth dating, in church is also not super easy. Though I suppose that depends on where you are and what church.
Yeah, fair point. Well, there's not a lot of men in church.
Well, it's like Jordan Peterson. Did you see Jordan Peterson in the controversial anything with Jordan Peterson when he was on with Piers Morgan? Did you see any of that? Where he cried about quote unquote incels. he was saying, you know, people, you know,
yeah, why not be their hero?
Right. He's like,
yeah.
are you the hero to the? And he's like, sure, why not? And he starts to cry a little bit.
Yeah.
And Piers Morgan is like saying, like, what's the, like, are you crying? You're tearing up. And he's like, well, and he's like, well, God, you know, I don't approve of the taking of the Lord's name in vain, but nevertheless, he says that, and he's like, these people they don't know how to make themselves attractive to women. And what the culture is telling them is completely confused. Now, there's obviously horrible, ugly, evil and wicked side to that whole thing, or can be. But, you know, the point of all that was to say that these young men are in a tough spot in the culture. But he also before he said any of that, he said to, you know, like, hey, look, the truth is, women should not back down from having high standards for their men. He says that's your gift. He's like, have high standards for men. So that's definitely true. And so my heart goes out to women who have a hard time finding a man. But in today's culture, my heart goes out to young men having a hard time trying to figure out how to approach this thing as well.
I noticed that when you get to a certain number of Facebook friends, you know, you don't really know a lot of these people, but you get a lot of stuff in your Facebook feed. And I see a lot of Christian single men who are good men whining about can't find good women. And I see a lot of women who can't seem to find a good man. Now, here's the difference between those two.
Yes, that question. I nodded at something else the other day, and an atheist acted like I was vigorously agreeing with what you were saying, which, of course, I always am. Well, much of the time. But I was nodding to Jim Amberg.
Yeah, so it's weird that now that we live in the internet age, that these two groups of, you know, disgruntled men and fed up women can't all find each other. But there is one difference between the single Christian men looking for a good woman and the single Christian women looking for a good man. The women do lower their standards and go out a lot.
Yeah.
And the guys never go out with anyone. So there is a difference. And maybe it's because they can't find any or whatever. But it's just easier for women to be able to at least go out with a guy than it is for... I mean, quit saying no to the people a lot of these Christian single women say yes and go out with trash that you can see is trash long before she starts complaining about it inevitably on Facebook in very public posts about the last boyfriend that lasted 3 weeks that's a dog, right? Whereas, like, if you date some of these good Christian men that I see that can't ever seem to find anyone to go out with, though I did learn that there's hope because apparently David Paulman now has a girlfriend. So there is hope for the rest of you.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah. Which, you know, amazingly enough.
You know how a moment ago, how you kind of winced at me, obviously, because we do this about the taking the Lord's name in vain thing, you know? Well, this fellow in the chat is saying, God is not Yahweh's name, dummy, right? You were probably looking across at me thinking a similar thing, right? Because we talk about this sort of thing all the time.
Yeah, whatever. I was more...
You were more interested in the pastoral concerns you were having.
Yes. So...
Is he crying? There's no crying in baseball. You know, we're sitting about 3 miles from where that statement was made.
Yeah.
In the movie.
Yeah. So look, become my Facebook friend, and I'll just start playing matchmakers. Like, go out with this person because you can't find anyone else to go out with, and lady, you just stay trash. And I'll make you all happy.
We're going to get back to the TikToks, but Bible's on a Budget says there are simple things that we men can do. Have good hygiene.
Yes.
Check. Exercise. Yes. But you could do that and still struggle with finding a godly wife or know how to talk to any woman. That's certainly true as well.
That is certainly true, but the hygiene and exercise...
That gets you a long way.
Yeah. Well,
that gets you a long way. Okay, back to the TikToks, Pritchard. I know you're jonesing to get to more TikToks.
You want to know one of the silliest things about being raised devoutly evangelical? Children are expected to read the Bible. If that doesn't seem weird to you, stick with me for a second. You might think of the Bible as "For God so loved the world," or that one emotionally lucid moment Paul had when he wrote about love and now everyone reads it at their weddings. But those are the boring parts, to a kid anyways. While other kids are learning to read with comics or whatever normal parents have around the house, here fundy kids are 6, 7, 8 years old devouring stories of Jezebel being defenestrated and then eaten by dogs, or Judas's bowels bursting out, or Noah's sons laughing at him when he was passed out drunk and naked, or Lot's daughters who got him drunk and screwed him so they could have babies. And those are just a few highlights off the top of my head, decades later. The good book is full of children's stories like these. It's basically Game of Thrones, except if you don't read it, you go to hell. I almost forgot about all the times.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you get the point.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so if you don't read it, you go to hell. Well, that's terrible theology, even for John Piper's son. But all I heard is, yeah, we get to read really, really awesome stories versus we have to read just plain old comic
Well,
books
first of all, everyone who's listening to this
Yeah.
is probably thinking, okay, well, first of all, that's John Piper's son. Do we say that?
Yeah.
But secondly, people are looking at this, and it's always just presumed. Well, all of these things are things that God wanted, right? Well,
Yeah.
not all of these things are things that God wanted.
But they are things that happen.
They happen in the Bible. Yeah. Now,
Right.
some of them are things that God did or God commanded or whatever. But not all of them are. So the little quick jaunt through that is a little sloppy anyway.
Yeah.
With that, if we're making, I mean, it's TikTok, so I don't hold it against him, but
But
I do hold it against
yeah.
him if that's what he's trying to communicate.
But all I heard from that is, okay, so that I don't know that that's true, that there's this expectation that you want 6, 7, and 8-year-olds to always be reading their Bible, and then a parent not reading it with them to make sure the stuff that they're reading is age appropriate. But I've never been that parent anyway. I was like, let's read all of it, and yeah, I do it with my kids, but at the same time, like I said, seems like they're reading a lot cooler stories than just typical stuff like Cat in the Hat and whatever comic book you have laying around.
Yeah, I mean, like, I really don't like. Do people? I mean, I guess people do like hear that like about something that happens in the Bible that God didn't do. And do they? I understand when someone thinks, well, this looks rough. What God did do. I get that. That's the old canard we deal with all the time. But and that's a relevant question. But when it's stuff God didn't do, like, is it just the presence of something like that in the text is a problem for Christianity, or a problem for you in believing Christianity is true or something, or that this book is legitimate or something like that? I really don't quite understand, because people will, and I've said this for years, Christians might sit and listen to a preacher say something in church and get bent out of shape if the pastor said something that they thought was too violent or sexually explicit, or something that has to do with, perhaps, let's say, telling you that you shouldn't let your kids just watch sexually explicit content on HBO or on Netflix or whatever. Maybe it's something as simple as that sort of thing, and I completely lost my train of thought.
Yeah, all I heard is, hey, that show that we don't let you watch on HBO?
Oh, yeah, they have.
This is like that.
Right,
This is like Game
yeah.
of Thrones, except guess what? It has a better finale.
Yeah.
You just sold the Bible to everyone. Thank you.
Yes, that's the point. It's better than all of those things. And the truth is, people don't have a problem. They have a problem with the preacher saying, don't let your kids watch sexually explicit stuff like this, that, and the other thing, where they show this, that, and the other thing. But then they have no problem going home and letting their kids watch it, and it's no big deal because no one directly said anything to their kid. Well, it's actually could be much more powerful coming from the cultural currency of the streaming channels and stuff. So it's okay if the Bible talks about some stuff that you consider a little rough, because your kids are seeing that anyway, and you're just trying to give them some sort of a dry, air-conditioned, drywall version of Christianity.
Well, at the same time, though, there is a difference between seeing something visually and reading text, or having text read to you.
That's true too.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So a 6, 7-year-old or 8-year-old who has not seen what this looks like in reality, when they're trying to imagine this, especially the Bible isn't like, it's not like reading the Iliad where you learn 1,000 different ways someone can die from a spear.
No,
right?
It's filtered through you're saying it's filtered through their frames of reference.
Yeah, there are levels of imagination, which is, and the Bible is like less descriptive than even the Iliad, that, gets pretty graphic. And
here's an
but
example.
I mean, like what is like Judas's bowels bursting open? Well, they don't. That's unless they've seen the Silence of the Lambs, they don't really. The imagery
If you showed us his bowels bursting forth in great detail or something, like they would do on one of these high concept, gritty, nonsense shows or something.
Yeah.
That would be like, there's no point to that. Like, we're just glorifying death or something at this point? Like, what's going on here? But what the little boy hears when he reads the Bible and it says someone bowels exploded is that just sounds kind of like
poop or vomit.
Right.
You know.
Or somebody got slayed with a sword. Well, filtering that through their experience, they're not imagining what you see on one of these shows where someone's bowels come falling out and they're gruesome and blood everywhere. They're thinking about someone getting stuck with a sword or getting shot on G.I. Joe where the person falls down and they die. You know, people.
No one gets shot on G.I. Joe, Braxton.
Well,
everything misses. Like, and every time a plane gets hit, you see the parachute.
Well, now that's true.
Now in the movie,
I was about to say you have to get to the Cobra
did
law.
Stab Duke.
Yeah. Cobra la 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 la.
Yeah.
That's an inside joke that everybody thinks I just did something really weird if they don't know, even if they do know. Here's something from a philosopher who we know, who works for us. Piper's entire assumption is also that God, if real, must be a cosmic pushover. Why, if God exists, should he only appeal to guys that would rather hug than fight? Like, here's the thing.
Amen.
The truth is,
thank you,
that we are very provincial, you know, temporally provincial. We think in our day, in our Western world, we have these particular scruples and we get ate up about certain things.
Except they will make Game of Thrones the most popular thing, but then balk because some story in the Bible's messed up.
Right.
You know.
Right.
I'm trying not to be inconsistent in that way. But
I
culture is
that.
very inconsistent in what they whine about and what they claim their sensitivities are. Right. Of course, reality is also harsh.
Here's an example. Judges 3:31. After him was Shamgar, the son of Anath, who killed 600 Philistines with a pointed stick. He also saved Israel. Praise the Lord. A little boy hears that. Listen, when I was not praise the Lord for violence, but praise the Lord that's in the Bible and it gives us something that connects to, you know, the sort of things that people do. You know, it's like when I was a youth pastor, our pastor did Bible school for normal people or something. And so you weren't going to get any kind of like college credit, obviously.
Right.
But instead of on Sunday night of us having like a typical like sermon, service, music, all that, on Sunday night for a month, you would pick what classes you wanted to go to and you could just go learn about. And some of them were like really serious, like we want to learn about stuff. But some of it was like for the teenage boys, they had cool stuff in the Bible. That was one of the classes, cool stuff in the Bible. And one of them was the story of Ehud, where the sword is stuck into the belly and all the fat rolls over.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Can't get the arm back out and all that whole thing. And the church, like, you know, cool stuff in the Bible. Here, go learn about this.
Yeah.
Is this a reason to reject Christianity? I don't know.
I don't get it.
All right, let's get back to another TikTok here.
Okay.
Hey, Eden. Yeah, I was just listening to you say some really Christian-y things that I don't agree with. And I don't like to feel discomfort, so that feeling tells me that I need to come over to you and tell you what you need to do. And so my atheist friends and I, we really fell in love with this book written by this man named Mike. And we know you don't know him personally, and we've never met him, but we just love and absolutely agree with every rule that he says and how you should live your life. And we know that's how you should live your life too. So what he says is that if someone says something or does something that is not in the book, they need to apologize and take it back or else. So do you want to take it back now, or do you want to come with us to our gathering on Friday and do it in front of all of us? That would really make us feel better.
Pritchett.
What evidence do you have for Mike's book and why anyone should follow it? Because if I'm just listening to you talk about it, that's evidence that I don't want to be there.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I do agree that there are probably Christians that, though this is a caricature, that this is true of or something. But here's the thing. I know there are some atheists. It's like how they said something like in the video title, like how those Christians or how if atheists acted like those Christians. Well, this is how those atheists react. Those kinds of atheists, they do the same sort of thing. That this is offensive, can't be discussed. This is, you know, all those same kind of things. There are people like that are
Don't
atheists.
tweet that, or you're going to lose your job, and we'll make sure that you can't get an acting job anymore anywhere in Hollywood and all kinds of things. Look, the one thing that you can give a a shout out to Christianity is Christianity has popularized evangelism to the point that everyone is now an evangelist for something, right? And so this idea that, you know, you need to believe what we believe or else, I think the or else, that's not something that you can hurl at Christians anymore, because at least, you know, our or else is, you know, you'll be separated from God for all eternity. Your or else is we're going to ruin your life starting 5 minutes from now for the rest of your life, and we're not going to relent until you, you know, either disappear off the face of the planet or start spouting the things that we want you to say and agree with us. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm not buying that. So Christians, keep getting in their faces, because they have no problem getting in your face and telling you what rules you need to live by and how you need to organize your life around what they believe. Everyone's shoving their beliefs down each other's throat, which is why I never had a problem when anyone said, you just want to shove your beliefs down. Yes, because mine are better than yours. Let's have that conversation, and the truth will win out in the end.
And everyone thinks theirs are better than the other person, or else they wouldn't hold that
belief,
right? So it's not like you're being like some kind of jerk. But honestly, there's Pritchett's response. Here's my response. Be nice to people. Talk to them about the evidence like Pritchett says. And if he said anything mean, don't do that. All right? Are we good? You agree with all that? I mean, that's what you'd expect me to say, right?
Well, I mean, no, I don't agree with you when you said don't be mean if they are intentionally being mean, because you've also told me that always rise to the level of your opponent. You don't have to go beyond it.
I said up to a certain point.
Yeah.
Don't go. Because Adam Harwood's the one who told me that. And you know he's only going up a few gears.
Right. But, I mean, like, if of course, she was, you know, performing for the video in the way that she was acting, right? But at the same time, people who are not Christians act exactly like that. So,
all right. You got time for more, Pritchett?
I work for you.
Here we go.
Name one corrupt story in the Bible. Challenge accepted. How about a bunch of them? In the story of Adam and Eve, God intentionally set them up for failure. He placed them in the Garden of Eden, put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil smack dab in the middle of it, commanded them not to eat of the tree, and even though he knew they were going to fail and knew that the serpent would deceive them, God still decided to punish them anyway.
Yeah.
Pritchett.
Right. Just like I'm going to punish my kids when I put out cookies in the cookie jar. Look, my kids are now 17 and 20, right? Mm-hmm. And we make Christmas candies. We make a different Christmas candy once a week. And I'm not just talking about my kids. I'm talking about they're basically adults now, right? And I tell them that I want this round of candy to last until the next round of candy is made.
Yeah.
And the cookie jar is on the kitchen counter. And where we put more than just cookies, we put whatever the dessert is. Now, I know that if I did not hide it,
it wouldn't work.
Well, they'll snoop through my stuff. But
no, if you don't hide
I should be able to just leave it there and say, guess what? This is my house. That candy or cookies or whatever needs to last, and I'm not going to take it and remove it from their access to it. But you know what? I also pay their cell phone bills, which means that anytime I want to revoke those cell phone privileges, I can do it. And guess what? I know that candy ain't going to last because it's sitting there on the kitchen counter. I know that. I'm not even omniscient, and I knew what they were going to do. So what I want to know is, why is that bad? Well, why am I wrong for setting up the rules? My house, my rules.
Well, it's just if your rules didn't make any sense, is the idea that these rules don't make any sense. God puts this tree here and sets them up for failure by saying, and he knows what's going to happen, right? Because he's omniscient. Like you said, you knew it was going to happen. But your rules make sense. The allegation here is these rules just don't make sense.
How are my rules any different than God's rules? Here's a tree.
Because we need cookies around, and we are going to eat the cookies. We just aren't going to eat them.
No, God even did better than I did. That's the candy, because I do the grocery shopping, and I ain't buying any candy other than the candy I put in the jar. God gave him candy all over the house.
Mountains of candy.
Mountains of candy. Just don't eat that one.
Here's an image of what he gave them.
Exactly. Exactly.
But
so God is actually a better person than I am, for sure, because I'm like, that's the only candy in the house. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And we only usually have it like once a year. around Christmas time. And by golly, my house, my rules.
Yeah.
And God's like, eat all this other candy, but just not from that one.
Yeah, let me explain to...
And if my kids truly loved me, there would be candy from Tuesday to the following Tuesday.
Let me give a possible explanation here that I think I've given before that helps with this. And we have someone in the chat, Kip Davis. I think I've seen him. I think he's some kind of like a Old Testament guy or some kind of scholar or something, and goes on the atheist shows. Mm-hmm. And he was the one that was giving me a trouble about God isn't the name of God, or something like that about Yahweh. He says, "Hey all, enjoying the insufferable bloviating," and he says, "So few people actually understand the story in Genesis 2, these jokers included." So I'll give my explanation, and then I'll let you respond to what has been said by Kip. Here's my explanation of a way to look at this that makes sense. Obviously, if a person doesn't believe this is true or take it seriously, or just says it's just ancient materials and not anything more than that.
Yeah.
But since we actually believe all of this, here's the way I make sense out of this. Say, however you understand the story of the garden, here's what makes sense out of this, I think, and that is that we know, as we think that the Bible reveals to us, that God is about love. Love is the ultimate goal. Love yourselves. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love the Lord your God. And so in the garden, if you didn't have the tree in the midst of the garden so that someone could choose to not do what God wants, not act out of love, giving them of themselves because of another, but instead, they have this thing they could choose to disobey. They could choose. Well, this gives us free will, and I take a certain amount of free will to be necessary for a robust sense of love to really be possible. And so there had to be some opportunity in the garden for them to disobey God. Otherwise, it would be meaningless, and we would have people on the other side saying something like they were forced. They didn't even have an opportunity, to not do what God wants. Well, no, they have that opportunity, so there's freedom there. But if you're God, you have to deal with the fact that if you give people free will, they're going to use it for good and for evil. So there's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. However you take the story in the garden. One thing that the reason that the story is there is to help the Israelites make sense. It's a universal creation story, right? And so whether you think that it's like literal history or metaphor or whatever else, mm-hmm. regardless of how you understand its historicity or its literary genre, what it is there, it is to inform the Israelite people of why the world
it isn't anything as deep as that. His concern was that you equated eating the fruit in the garden to candy when they have mountains of candy. That's what shows that you don't really understand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, I keep
it wasn't even something as on the level of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I keep trying to be like Jesus and use like parables and analogies and stuff like that, but I'll try to stop because I heard they don't like Leighton Flowers for doing the same thing, even though Jesus did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so next TikTok. Do we have something else? Let's move on. I don't know if I've got anything else, really, do I? Oh, do you want to hear another one from this guy, or do you want to? We'll just move on.
What is it? Right.
Someone explained to me why it's considered okay for the Christian college girls to marry a man that they've known and dated for 6 months, and that's okay. But if I sign a year lease with the guy that I've been dating for the last 2.5 years, suddenly I'm a sinner.
Yes, for Christians, that's true. If you're not a Christian, then Christians will still look at your behavior as sinful behavior and won't do it themselves. But yeah, that's
these are kingdom rules. These are for Christians.
Yeah, that's the way
we think your life would be improved if you would become a Christian and live by these rules. But you don't have to become a Christian and live by these rules.
Right, but maybe you should think about whether or not those rules are good or bad. Because here's the thing: it's a lot. Let's just say.
Hold on. Brian, we just covered that in some measure in detail just like 3 minutes ago. So maybe if you just click back, maybe it really was just a minute ago. So just to help. Go ahead.
Yeah. But also, the Christian girl who marries the guy she's been dating for 6 months, they are entering into a commitment and a covenant.
A lot of responsibility.
And then on top of that, the legal ramifications. Whereas if something happens to the two of y'all, one of y'all is stuck with a lease for a year.
Yeah, this says nothing about your commitment to each other beyond what has to do with an
apartment. We have a lease, and by the way, if we break up, we're going to be bitter roommates for the duration of the remainder of the lease, or you just walk out and who cares, and you're stuck paying the full rent. So
Eric says, but what if sin was made up just for the Bible? Well, that's why we said these are kingdom rules. If you don't believe any of this, well, we wouldn't expect you to think the way we're thinking about it.
Yeah.
That's what's odd about the question. But as far as, like you say, yeah, 2 kids that want to get married after 6 months or 3 days, if that's what they determine God wants for them to do, and they're willing to make the commitment and the covenant before God, and now maybe their parents should have something to say about that. We think that people should live their lives in community, in a community of faith, and listen to wise advisors around them. And of course, we think that you should, follow laws and be old enough and all those kind of things.
Speaking of which, my wife's grandfather,
but what business is it of yours if they want to get married after 6 months? That's a Christian thing. They're committed.
Hubert and Javetta, her grandmother. Did you know that they got married after only 3 days since your 3-day thing? And guess how long they were married?
How long?
For over 60 years until he passed away, and she's still alive. And she never remarried. Of course, she's in her 90s now. But I mean, they actually 2 Christians. They got married after 3 days and stayed married until he passed away. Till death did they part after 60 some odd years. How about that? Whereas you signed a lease with someone you may not even remember his name 5 years from now.
We would hope you would, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So,
but I don't know why they're upset. See, this is. She wants to know. Okay, people always get upset because Christians have a certain standard, right? That they don't agree with, right? But they understand. Complaining about it is, again, inconsistent in their thought because they have standards they expect from us to be more tolerant or open-minded to this, that, or the other that goes against our beliefs, and then they judge us for that. It makes no sense to me. Okay, you understand in principle that you don't like the fact that Christians judge you as a sinner if you do this thing. Okay, but you do the very same thing when you judge Christians for standards that you don't like and you think that they should see it your way. So you can get over it, or you can try to argue for a basis for why what you do should be okay for Christians. And by the way, I will, to her credit though, more Christians these days are just going ahead and signing leases with people they don't marry anyway, which is bad. So, yeah, I'll acknowledge that. And a lot of Christians don't actually think that that's wrong anymore, and that's a shame.
Philosophy Porch actually makes an important, subtle point. It has nothing to do with signing a lease. Yeah, technically, there's nothing wrong with signing a lease with a person. It pertains to what you're doing in the house or apartment.
Right.
So there you go.
Aside from video games.
Yeah, you can play video games. If you rent an apartment just to play video games together, maybe that's fine. I don't know. Seems weird. You got other problems.
Yeah.
Which one of you are the grumpy guys or the grumpy Bible prof? Well,
both of us, by the way.
Sometimes I'm told I get a little sassy, and people always say they prefer the sassy, but I'm typically not. It's mostly Pritchett. All right. Well, that's the end of that, and it's the middle of the day, but we've only been going for 40 minutes. Does anybody have any questions or comments that we can address before we go? While I'm waiting for you to think of something, and since we have a rare moment where Pritchett doesn't have anything to say, I'll just go ahead and tell you that we encourage you that if you like what we do here and responding to people on the internet and giving their reasons why to reject Christianity and that sort of thing, and us understanding the Old Testament with through the lens of the New Testament as well, and not seeing anything academically incredible about that as Christians, then you can check us out at patreon.com/TrinityRadio. We'd also love for you to go check us out at Teespring. We've got some shirts and things. This is John McCrae's shirt. He's on there too on Teespring. We would appreciate your help there, and you can support the show. And I guess also I'd like to encourage you.
I thought
to
I was
check
not
out.
grumpy. I was fair to them.
Yeah, I thought you were pretty good.
I agreed with one of them, and I kind of said to this last one, "Hey, I mean, more Christians are doing it your way now."
Yeah.
But she did ask. She said, "Explain to me why." So,
Perseverance says,
I even granted her request.
Actual question about the fall. If people always choose what they want most, Because that's what happens, Pritchett. How is it possible in the good pre-fall world without sin for people to most desire to disobey God?
Well, since I don't believe that people always choose according to their greatest desire, because that just is a meaningless tautology, which means that the prevailing desire prevailed, which gives us no information about how it ranks in terms of all of the desires that they have. The question doesn't really mean anything to me since I'm not a compatibilist.
Yeah. So here's another question from the same person, but you'll want to answer it. Also, from a couple of weeks ago, how did talking about beauty with your wives go? So for those that don't remember, we were talking about arguments from beauty, that sort of thing, I think. And I think what was happening was you were saying that people would not say something about a woman. Like if you went home and said to your woman, "You are beautiful," you're saying something about her. You're not saying something about you. Mm-hmm. And so that's why it would be a compliment. But if you went home and said it, and you said it in a real like snarky type way or something, like they wouldn't like that. And I was like, no, you can say something that speaks more to your appreciation of their beauty than beauty in themselves. And you could do that by doing something like saying, well, I find you to be the most beautiful woman in the world. To me, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. And I said she would still think that was an incredible compliment. You said she wouldn't. And so I said, okay, here's what we'll do. We'll go home and I'll say to my wife, to me, you're the most, we'll both do both. Yeah. On one day, we'll say, you are the most beautiful woman in the world. And then the next day, we'll say, I find you to be the most beautiful woman in the world to me. And see if she throws a fit and kicks you out of the house. And you maintained, and I think the direct quote was, she will go crazy and kick me out of the house. That will happen.
I never said that.
That's exactly what you said. So they want to know, how did that go?
When I tell my wife that she is beautiful, she takes it as a compliment. When I say something like, you are very beautiful to me, you know what she says? You're biased.
Yeah, because
she's exactly right,
often,
and that's the correct response.
Well,
because
you are,
it means less to just say,
you may be biased.
To me, you're so beautiful. To me, what you're saying is, yeah, not to other people though. That's what that sounds like.
So to a fideistic grandma, Christianity is the most correct religion in the world. Does that mean she's wrong because she's fideistic and biased?
No.
No, of course not. And even if you're biased about your wife's beauty, it doesn't mean she's not the most beautiful woman in the world. In fact, and of course, since you take that to be objective, maybe she is. Now, she's not. She's very beautiful. But my wife is the most objectively beautiful woman.
My wife.
And now we're on the other side of the turntables.
Yeah, but see, beauty being objective has nothing to do with subjective levels of attractiveness, because the reason why I can say that my wife is beautiful, and I believe that I'm making an objective, factual statement about reality. And also when I say that my wife is probably one of the most beautiful women to me, is I'm also making a subjective statement about my attractedness to her, because like I like a certain type of woman that actually looks like a woman and is, got the right curves in the right places, like
I'm
women
uncomfortable.
do. Yeah.
This is gross.
So scrawny girls, not really my thing. So that doesn't mean scrawny girls can't be objectively beautiful, because there are some who are objectively beautiful and skinny and not my type. Right? But I can still look at them and say, objectively, she's beautiful. But as far as my subjected attractedness to women, I'm more attracted to, having the type of like Jennifer Lopez type curves.
Pritchett, this is not what Trinity Radio is all about.
I know, but I'm just trying to illustrate the difference between beauty as objective, whether I'm attracted to it or not personally, right? My subjective attractedness.
Yeah.
I can be unattracted to something beautiful physically.
Right.
Like a woman, I can be
You can find a woman beautiful and not be attracted
to her. Yes.
Yes. I got, and that was, you could have just said that. Here, do you believe a virtuous and committed couple can be married in the eyes of God, who knows their hearts, without going through any legal or traditional sacrament or rituals? Well, yes, if I think so, in a situation where that becomes impossible.
Depends on what you mean, sacrament. I mean,
well, what I'm going to say about it is,
it's loaded language.
Well, no, I'm not. I'll take it as it stands.
Okay.
Yes, they could be married in the eyes of God Like if you had two people on a desert island somewhere, I think that God's fine with them considering they commit to each other, we're married. There doesn't have to be a ceremony and people around. Okay.
Sure.
But Christian marriage and religious marriage has, historically has most often been a public commitment, not just a contract, but a covenant, which is not just a contract. A contract is more like the lease we talked about, but a covenant is something that you promise in front of your family, your friends. Your stuff's going to be now together. You're promising it to each other, to God, but mostly to each other, to God.
Yeah.
Is covenant, and so it's a much more serious thing. And if you're able to do that,
and
those are the
that's
ramifications.
a ritual and a sacrament.
Mm-hmm.
If we use those in the loosest, that religious significance that it's imbued in the act that is happening, that we believe has a reality to it. That covenant is real. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
And so,
but I don't think Christians should do that and not get it legally done. And the reason is because that is, to the extent that is something that can be done in your nation. Yeah. That is something that
you should do.
A robust expression. Of covenant.
I would be okay in a nation that did away with the legality of it. Like if the government got out of, I know a lot of Christians disagree with this, but if like government got out of the marriage business altogether, that doesn't mean marriage ends, right? If they just left that to churches and religions and whatever else. So I'm not one of those types of Christians who thinks that you need the state involved in every aspect of your life. So but insofar as that you live in a nation that has marriage licenses and whatever, you should get that. I agree with you on there. But if we decided as a nation to get rid of all of that doesn't mean marriage vanishes.
Right.
And I lean,
and
I know contrary to a lot of Christians, I lean to get the government out of marriage altogether camp.
Who organizes the life around Game of Thrones? I think asked rhetorically, but a number of Comic-Cons would show you that quite a few people.
Yeah, a lot of people organize their lives around a lot of television shows because they have to watch it the second it drops. Like, that's why I love Netflix. Netflix, they give you the whole season. You can either watch it the day that it drops or you can just ignore it. But all of these other streamers are like, it's like it comes every once a week, one episode a week. And I know some people who organize their lives so that they can see it the day something
But there's
comes
a
out.
deeper issue,
There are people who organize their lives to go to the world, premiered The Phantom Menace back in 1999.
Yeah.
Camped out for weeks. A lot of people organize their lives around a lot of things that have nothing to do with religion, and that's why it looks suspiciously religious, and that's why sometimes Christians say things like, well, you worship something. And turns out they do.
I was going to throw up this one, but, first of all, there is something more subtle about that is deeper, and that is you may not, even if someone didn't organize their lives around Game of Thrones, even though they do, and now there's like a Church of the Jedi and all this weird stuff, which I think is more tongue-in-cheek than anything else. I hope it's more tongue-in-cheek than anything else. And yes, sports fans. But,
thank Cedar Heights Baptist Church for offering the 8 o'clock service so that on Sundays my dad could organize his life around church and seeing the Cowboys kick off by noon.
But, yeah. Well,
it happens.
But there's
People
a deeper thing is
even
if you don't develop your life around it in the way that you go to Comic-Con and stuff, watching programming, this would sound like what a youth pastor would say, but I don't care. The truth is, it's true. It's true that you will be impacted by this. You don't think mainlining TikTok and HBO and streaming whole seasons like Pritchett does, you don't think that affects your thinking? It does. There are things that you and I and all of us consider to be inappropriate words that we didn't, inappropriate words to just say casually in public. And I'm not talking about the big ones that everybody's thinking of that weren't that way when we were kids. We'd call each other some of these words, but now we take them to be, you can't say those words. And I think that's probably a good thing in that it really leads to a more decent society. But that is because of culture and TV and all of that. And so it can influence us for good. It can influence us for bad. And let's be honest about where it usually influences us.
Let me ask you a question that's unrelated to all this.
Uh-oh.
When you watch YouTube videos, you speed them up to double speed, right? Mm-hmm. If streaming services offered you that same feature, would you watch shows at double speed?
Oh, they do. Netflix does or used to have that on the desktop version. And you can actually certainly download a add-on for Google Chrome and then open up Netflix and probably do it that way. I say certainly, but probably. But they have a way to do it.
But I mean,
Matt Chisholm was the first one to tell me
if it was
about
just a built-in featured option, would you do it?
For some stuff, for documentaries maybe, or something where I'm wanting to be immersed. No, but something where I just want information, like a true crime thing or something. Skeptical Mantis says, what should you do if your spouse changes religion? Well, I can only answer from a Christian perspective. So if I was a Christian, which I am, and my spouse changed religion,
I still think 1 Corinthians 7, I think, applies anyway.
Keep loving them.
Yeah.
If they leave you, okay, but you don't leave them. You love them. You try to minister to them. You try to encourage them. You don't be a jerk. You be supportive. You still be their spouse in the ways that you're supposed to be their spouse, which means, you're not going to be going around trying to cause dissension all the time about this, but you'll have to be wise about how to impact this spouse for Christ. But yeah, nothing changes in terms of your obligations. Right, Pritchett?
Exactly.
Okay, well, I think I'll tell you, we've kind of went through a lot, and it's been about an hour now. Pritchett needs to get back to work, so I'm so excited that you all showed up.
Honestly, Atheist has an interesting question.
Oh, no, I did miss one before we get to Honestly Atheist, and he'll agree, because there was a person I did
Tim the Ancient.
No, Brian Stevens said for $10, and this is a person who I think has been very critical of a lot of apologetics channels, but Merry Christmas. Thank you for allowing dissenting opinions. Yes.
Merry Christmas.
We love that because they kind of take care of themselves. For example, a lot of people say, don't get into your own side conversations in the chat, or they get annoyed about that. We're fine. We don't care. Yeah. And secondly, like we had a person on here today saying, well, if you want academic, high-minded stuff, this is the last channel that you come to and all that. And then, of course, a few minutes ago, then, well, if someone wanted high information academic stuff, then you're the last person that would go to. These things just kind of take care of themselves, don't they?
Like the Kip Davis guy trying to mouth off, trying to undermine us. This is bothering me. I mean, dude, you've been very polite compared to others of your
I feel like I've had a massage with those kind of comments.
That's weak
from what we're used to dealing with.
Like whatever
Also, check out, if you really want to think we're off our rocker, well, I can't put this on Pritchett.
Tim the Ancient had a super chat too.
Check out Supernatural Stories. The link is in the description. It's our new podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you'll get to listen to real people. I'm barely there. Telling their supernatural stories of things that happened to them. You're not going to want to miss the most recent one with my new friend John Clash, as he talks about his experiences in Santeria and what did they ask him to give them of his biological
you don't
material.
Practice Santeria, do you?
I don't practice Santeria. I ain't got no crystal ball.
If you had $1 million,
I would spend it all.
Yeah, me too. Okay, let's get to Tim the Ancient's super chat, please, because you always forget him.
Well,
always. I see, man. I got you.
I've lost. I can't even find it.
Here we go. It's right there.
Did the biblical authors believe heaven?
Thank you for the super chat, Tim.
I want you to answer this, Bridget, because you and I have talked about this and the whole thing about coming with clouds and all that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. He says, did the biblical authors believe heaven was literally in the sky? And if that's the case, are we committed to believing that, since it's a truth about something spiritual?
Did they believe the heavens were literally in the sky? No, actually, I like the way that N.T. Wright explained it, and I think that ever since I heard him explain that to me, I think I've kind of stuck with his. I mean, there's a sense in which they believe that the heavens were the sky, and that's just a word, alternate word that you can swap out. And there is a sense of up there in a sense, but the way that you can think about it is that the heaven is behind the veil, right? That as if there's a curtain to reality that you could, pull back and then see all of reality in its fullest. And I think that that's probably right. That's kind of the sense in which the ancients would figure that this is all veiled, and then if you pulled back the curtain, it's not necessarily.
Does the ascension
it's
play
not necessarily
into that?
Yeah, and the way that it overlaps and interlocks with the kind of glory of God, or at the cross, or when you find Jesus when you're ministering to the poor and the oppressed and all that. And there's places where there's interlocks, right? But primarily though is if it's just right there. It's not necessarily out there. So I don't think Christians are committed to any particular single
but
view.
guess what? Even if it were the case that the language seemed to imply something like that, we talk that way. We talk that way. We talk about the sun rising and setting, even though that's not physiologically what's happening. Right. We talk that way. We talk about, we think about my grandma up in heaven. People say that. But they say up in heaven.
But Wright was trying to make the argument that the conceptual framework of the ancient biblical
is actually just like a curtain, right? You can look behind it. It's like a fish on the other side from the surface,
And even I think
I'm just saying that if it was exactly like the atheists might characterize that, they thought it was up. If you could take a rocket and go up, you could maybe get there or something. Even if that were to be the case, it's just like with the cosmological ideas they may have had at the time. The idea here is to teach theological truths. The idea is not to overhaul your understanding of the
but even the ancient pagans, they didn't believe that star was the actual God. Right. What they believed is that star is the icon that's powered by the God behind it, right? But not itself the God. That's kind of because for something to exist, it has to have a name and a functional ontology, and that's kind of how exist mattered into the minds of like the ancient Near Eastern people. So it's not just that simple. Even for pagan religions, say, well, if you just fly up there, you'll see them, right?
Last question of the day, Pritchett, and since this show has been primarily about you and TikTok and your love of that platform, here's the last one, although it has nothing to do with TikTok. I'll make it about TikTok. How many hours does Pritchett pedal a day versus how many he watches TikTok? There, answer that.
It's hard to say hours do I pedal, but I mean, that was 27,344 on Tuesday. Monday was 29,209. I think Wednesday was down 16,000. What was that? 16,505. And then today I'm only up to 5,000. It's hard to see on the camera. 5,256.
I'll tell you. I don't.
So
think
I don't count.
It doesn't count.
I don't count in terms of hours. I count. No, you sit there and you did the research, and you're like, you're right. That does do something.
That's true. I did research that right in front of you, and I mean, I'm research. I did what a lot of people do. I looked on Google, right? But it did seem that you were right, and I was shocked by that. It doesn't make any sense.
You can actually go on Google and find valid research studies on Google. It's
27 hours on Tuesdays? Did you say 27?
27,000 steps.
Steps, not hours. Steps.
Yeah, or pedals.
You said, and maybe I was talking to you, they didn't hear it. You don't.
I don't count the hours.
You count steps.
I count the tally.
You count fake steps.
Yeah, fake steps.
All right.
That have kept me between 11 and 13% body fat for 3 years now. So, I mean, it works. I don't have to go walk out in the cold. I don't have to stand on a treadmill and all that stuff. So get a pedal station. They're like $25 at Walmart.
Soon we're going to have back on Dr. David Allen, one of our professors who is a kind of really, really well known, particularly in the Southern Baptist world, but in the theological world, particularly with issues related to the atonement. And we're going to have him back on sometime very soon. And we're going to have a debate coming up on stuff to do with Catholicism.
Uh-oh. Not that, Chuck.
And we're bringing a Calvinist on.
Right.
Who you like.
Chris Day.
Nope. Not Chris Day.
Oh, Eli.
Nope. Not Eli.
Now we're out of Calvinists.
We're not out of Calvinists. We have more token Calvinists.
No, you said Calvinists you like.
Yeah, I like most of my Calvinists.
Who is it?
I can't tell you.
Oh.
I'm telling them.
That is
but I'm not telling them the name either. Because I want the other guy's name so it doesn't sound like I don't sound wrong saying.
Now he's going to think, well, he didn't say my...
Israel.
He doesn't count.
He counts. Is he not Calvinist?
Yeah, he's a Calvinist. We just don't count him. He's also a personal trainer. That's how I think of him.
KCA, we'll see you next time. And honestly, atheist, I love answering your questions. I'll see what I missed. Get to it next time.
Yeah, you got to put at Trinity Radio.
He does. He does it right. probably did it right. Okay. Oh yeah, Miss Mutilla says, "Oh, Catholicism." Yeah, but and to all the Catholics listening, I know you're like, just wait, just eventually you'll get there. But I'm going to listen to what these people say when they debate each other, right? We love you guys, and we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.